Welcome back. So we've been running through block periodization. Started with some videos on VO2 blocks, moved on to endurance and strength blocks, and now we have arrived at race-specific blocks. So I want to talk about some ideas to get so you get the most out of your race-specific block. So first up, say race to any athlete, they go bananas. They smash themselves and they go far faster than what their true race pace is. And they treat the training session like a race. So let's not be that person. Let's be smart and let's save our best performance for our A race. So we want to be able to race above our training performance. And this is something I do particularly well because I'm not interested in winning workouts. So what's going to be your best bet? Your best bet for almost everybody that's going to listen to this video is going to be to continue doing an endurance and strength focus, but insert low priority races with intent to prepare your body to race. And these low priority races are typically going to be shorter, half or a quarter of the duration of our main event. And that is going to give us a powerful, sustained stimulus and dose that is we're going to be able to absorb. It's also going to let us practice race tactics, race equipment, go through all the race peaking process. We did a video on that, and we're going to be able to practice all those things. So that is first up. So if you're listening to this video, that's probably your first port of call. Keep doing general capacity training and use low priority races to lift your overall fitness and prepare for that A event. And that applies particularly when we are stepping up in duration. We are going longer because the limiter for going longer is going to be our general capacity and our durability. We don't need to get faster. We need to enhance the ability to maintain our existing fitness for a longer duration. In other words, we need to slow down less. We need to fade less on our longest workouts. Okay, now race specific. You are going to hear a lot of different terms for race specific. So way back, Triathletes Training Bible, Joe Friel would refer to the build period. What are we building? Well, that depends on our event. We might be building our zone 4 capacity if it's a sprint triathlon. We might be building our general capacity if it's an Ironman. Same deal if it's a marathon. So think about what is the key characteristic, the key trait in my fitness toolbox that I need to build. That's what I need to be focusing on in this race-specific period. I don't need to be doing a bunch of red zone training because for most of our endurance events, they are not happening in the red zone. They are happening much lower in that profile, that aerobic profile, that zone profile. As well, the time to do that red zone training is in the VO2 block. Now we need to be thinking about, race-specific block, okay? The other thing you're going to hear race specificity and you're going to hear race efficiency. And these terms are used interchangeably, but they mean different things. So let me illustrate. Race specific is getting ready for the specific demands of the event. Sounds pretty straightforward. In other words, whatever it is, if it's going to be swim 1,500 meters, bike 40K, and run 10K, I need to be ready to put all of those together on game day at race velocity, race pace, and get my body used to that. Because quite often, if we're not used to that, we're going to be experiencing abdominal issues, cramping, GI shutdown. All of these things are really pacing issues and lack of preparation issues in disguise. We might hang a hat and say, I didn't get my fuel mix right. But the reality is my body was not prepared for the pace I tried to race. And you need to get yourself ready for the pace you're going to try and race, and prove it yourself in training that you can handle that. And that's why I really like those shorter duration races that are done at higher velocities, because if you can use them to set ceilings, but if you have an issue with pacing, it's going to come out in those events because you're going to blow yourself up. And it's much better to do that in a low priority event than in a longer event. Now, you might also have an issue. Your key issue might not be velocity related. Your key issue could be the ability to process calories or learn how to eat. And race specific in that sense is you're going to have to train yourself to eat for the duration of your event because you have more fitness than you can fuel based on your prior experience. Are you an athlete that falls apart in the final quarter of the event because you've run out of gas, run out of fuel? Well, then you need to train. So race specific for you is figuring out how much you can tolerate, and then figuring out if you're someone who goes very hard, figuring out how far you have to back off early so that you can get the fuel on board and get the energy uptake so you can perform later. So it's not always velocity focused. It's focused based on our individual needs. So think about that. Now, race efficiency. That's something you'll hear a lot from elite coaches. And what they don't always say, or they kind of talk around the issue. But really what we're talking about is reducing the energy required for a given velocity or a given pace or a given power. So how does the body do that? Well, the body will adjust if we use volume and load and we're operating in a slight calorie deficit. Now, if you are male and you are doing long training days, so you're moving a lot of mass for a long period of time, you will inevitably run into deficits naturally in all your blocks, particularly the endurance and strength block and this race-specific block. So you're not going to need to go out of your way to restrict intake. In fact, you might be impairing your session quality and your recovery if you do it, because by nature, a lot of endurance athletes say, well, if a little deficit's good, why don't I just go for a big deficit and really get the benefit from it? Doesn't work that way. So that's something to think about. If you are a big engine, high breakpoint athlete, and you consume a lot of oxygen at race pace, there may be something to having a slight deficit and running deficits on some of these longer days. Most of us are going to get it by virtue of volume, but if you're an amateur, you might need to do a little bit of this efficiency type training mixed in. And you'll need to be clear with yourself what you're doing, because you might get a better bang for your buck rather than restricting calories. You might actually get a better bang for your buck by going faster and moving and including some tempo and creating a deficit that way while eating at a normal rate. And so there's different ways to approach having a bit of a deficit in our training. Likewise, you will come across athletes that can do phenomenal training on very little intake. Most of the time, they are slower and smaller. Sometimes they're pretty quick though, and they're smaller athletes though, because they're not moving a lot of mass. If you're moving a lot of mass for a long period of time, almost everybody is going to need to fuel themselves appropriately. You need to figure out what appropriately is for yourself. Ideally, you've been doing that with your longer days all the way through your preparation. So write down what you eat and what happens. Like, you will forget if you don't write it all down. And when you do races, be sure to do short race report just to yourself. Look, this is what happened. This is how I felt. This is what I ate, so that you can learn and get more and more dialed on your intake for the conditions, for the pace you're giving, for how hot it is, and all these different things. It's an iterative process. And even athletes that race relatively frequently, you don't get that many chances to learn these things as an amateur. We're just not racing as often as the elites. So learn from it, write it down. Okay, let's just recap before we hit the road. Number one is your best bet. Keep doing endurance and strength and use low priority races for race specific training. Okay. Next, think about your specific needs. It's not always velocity. It might be learning to eat. It might be getting some durability into your legs. It might be learning how to pace more evenly and not blow yourself out in the first third of the race. Specifically train your number one thing. That's what you want to focus on. Finally, race efficiency. Does efficiency apply to you? If it does, you don't need to run massive deficits, but considering doing a little bit of deficit style training may be something for you. My personal preference is to go faster rather than eat less. And we create the deficit that way. So the body is still being fueled. We don't run the risk of compromising our recovery, and we're doing some stress. We're giving ourselves some stress at slightly faster than our average race velocity. I've found that very effective. Other people like doing these depletion trainings, but remember, if you're good at depletion training, odds are it's probably not your number one thing. You need to be focusing on some other aspect of your game. If you do have these slightly catabolic periods, you need to balance them across the year with anabolic periods. It can work great for 12 to 18 months. But if you start breaking down, chronic injury, and you're losing the top end bike power, really know the clock is ticking and you need to build yourself back up in the rest of your year. Okay, hope that helps. I've taken you through all the different parts of block periodization, and I hope you've learned something and it helps you achieve your goals.